mates! How's it going? In today's video, Chapter 6 of Arthas, Rise of the Lich King. There's an interlude which I'm going to skip, because it's just Jaina and Egwene talking about Arthas and what he becomes. Probably better if I just skip those bits to avoid confusion. But anyway, let's get... Jaina Proudmoore was currently hanging about in the Dalaran gardens, having a whale of a time. She'd been studying in Dalaran for about 8 years now, and yet the city still blew her mind, just as much as it had when she first arrived. Everything emanated magic, and to her, it was almost like a scent. Smell of flowers or something. Of course, that smell could have just been all the flowers. She was in a garden after all. The only reason she was in this garden at the moment was because she was taking a little bit of a lunch break before going right back to her studies. She bloody loved studying. In fact, she loved it so much, she'd impressed Archmage Antonidas, and he'd made her his apprentice about 2 years ago. In Kael'thas, there are trees that make these ones look like baby trees. I think you'd enjoy seeing them one day. Jaina turned to see Prince Kael'thas Sunstrider, son of Anasterian Sunstrider, king of the Kaldrai elves, and she politely smiled and gave him a bit of a curtsy. Your Highness, I wasn't aware you'd returned. A pleasure. Now Jaina, being the daughter of a ruler herself, was usually accustomed to talking with nobility and or royalty, but Kael'thas always made her feel a little bit nervous, and she wasn't entirely sure why. He was handsome, had that sort of elvish grace, but he was always quite stiff. Perhaps that was it. Maybe it was because he walked around like he constantly had a stick up his arse. Kael'thas then grabbed himself an apple from one of the trees. There's a certain heartiness about food native to human lands that I've come to appreciate. Sometimes elven food, although delicious, obviously, still leaves one hungry for something more substantial. Jaina smiled. Elves could be a bit arrogant sometimes, but the prince was obviously just trying quite hard to put her at ease. Shame it wasn't really working. So, you're back for a while? Yes, my business in Silvermoon is concluded for the moment, so I shouldn't need to depart again anytime soon. Kael'thas then took another bite of his apple, whilst maintaining weirdly intense eye contact with Jaina, waiting for her reaction, it would seem. Well, we're all pleased at your return, Your Highness. Now, Jaina, I've told you before. Just call me Kael. Right, Kael, like the cabbage. Gotcha. So, how's your studies going? Very well. Watch. Jaina then pointed at a squirrel that was perched above on a branch and murmured a spell to herself. And the squirrel turned into a sheep, and then started falling to its death. So, the young mage quickly extended her hand and the squirrel sheep stopped, mid-air, and then gently floated down to safety. It then looked at her, bleated, blinked a couple of times, and then poof, it was a squirrel again. And after shooting her a look that basically said, "F*** you bitch!" it quickly darted back up into the tree. Okay then, well done. No more setting books on fire, I hope. Jaina then blushed as she remembered that incident. It was shortly after she'd first arrived in Dalaran. Her fire spells were a bit shit, and she'd accidentally incinerated a tome that Kael'thas had been holding, almost singeing his eyebrows off. As a result, she'd been instructed not to practice fire spells again, unless she was near a fountain or something. No, that hasn't happened for a while. I'm pleased to hear it. I wasn't making idle conversation, by the way, when I invited you to come to Kael'thas. I know you're learning much from this marvellous city, but I think you would benefit from visiting an entire land, where magic is part of the culture. Surely you must have some curiosity about our Sunwell. I do indeed. I'd love to see it. But I think for now, my studies can be best advanced here, where people know what to do when I light books on fire. Both of them laughed at that, but Kael still seemed to let out a bit of a sad sigh as well. Perhaps you're right. Well, excuse me. Archmage Antonidas wishes for me to tell him all about my time in Silvermoon. Nonetheless, I look forward to more demonstrations of how your training has advanced, and spending more time with you. The prince then placed a hand on his heart and bowed, and Jaina didn't really know how to respond to that, so she just kind of curtsied again, and then watched as he left. But before she could go back to her studying and shiz, a pair of hands abruptly covered her eyes. Guess who? Well, your hands are calloused, so you're not a wizard. You smell like horses and leather. Jaina knew it was Arthas. This is just how people flirt, apparently. But Jaina couldn't hide her delight as she turned around and saw him, gave him a hug, and then realised that might have been a bit forward, so she stepped back and dropped him a curtsy. Your Highness, this is a surprise. What are you doing here? Less of that, Your Highness, bollocks, Jaina. And in answer to your question, there's so little going on in Lordaeron at the moment that my father agreed to my request to come study here for a bit. Study? But you're a paladin. Not becoming a mage, are you? Nah, sod that. But it occurred to me that the best place to learn about history, the nature of magic, and all those other things a king needs to know is here, in Dalaran. I'm impressed, Arthas. The boy who sneaked me out in the middle of the night to go spying on orcs wasn't quite so interested in history and knowledge. Arthas chuckled at that. Honestly, I still don't really give a shit. Wait, what? Now I'm confused. So why did you want to come here then? Arthas didn't answer that question with words. Instead, he grinned as he took her hand and kissed it, and Jaina's eyes widened. Was he coming on to her. But before she could ask, Arthas winked at her and bowed. "I'll see you tonight at dinner, Babs." And see him tonight at dinner she did. The dinner itself was quite formal. The return of Prince Kael'thas and the arrival of Prince Arthas on the same day had sent the servants into a bit of a frenzy. They'd put out the decent knives and forks. The dinner was served in the large dining room that was only reserved for special occasions, and Archmage Antonidas presided over the dinner himself, which was a pretty big deal. He wasn't the type of bloke that normally hosted dinner parties. Lethargic or no, they are dangerous. My father agrees with that assessment, Prince Kael'thas. That's why the camps exist. Expensive, sure, but a little gold is a small price to pay for the safety of the people. You humans could solve the problem of safety by simply executing the creatures, rather than taxing your citizens so severely just to keep them locked up. Jaina then recalled her one brief glimpse of the Orcs. "Have you been to the camps, Prince Kael'thas? Have you actually seen what they've become?" "No, Lady Jaina, I haven't. Nor do I need to. And to be honest, I can't imagine you've seen them either, being a lady of such refinement." Jaina didn't dare look over at Arthas as she replied, "I do not think refinement has any bearing on one's desire to see justice. In fact, I think it more likely that a refined individual would not wish to see sentient beings slaughtered like animals." Jaina returned to eating her soup, and Kael'thas looked at her, quite confused. What was all that about? But the conversation took a bit of a turn when Antonidas piped up. "The issue is not who pays for the camps, or whether they're necessary. It's the lethargy that intrigues me. I don't believe that it's confinement that causes it, nor do I believe it's an illness. At least not one that we need to worry about catching." Antonidas didn't usually get involved in idle chit-chat, so pretty much everyone else had stopped talking and was just staring at him. And Jaina was surprised for a different reason. This was the first time she'd heard any of the Magi talk about the Orcish situation at all, and she had no doubt that Antonidas had deliberately chosen this moment to reveal some information. With two princes present, word would travel quickly to their respective kingdoms, and it was Arthas that was the first to take the bait. If it's not an illness, then what is it? It is my understanding that the Orcs were not always so bloodthirsty. Khadgar once told me what he learned from Garona, Garona? The half-breed that murdered King Lane? With all due respect, I wouldn't trust anything that bitch said. This information came before she turned traitor, and it has been verified through other sources. They committed themselves to demonic influence. Their skin turned green, their eyes red. They were saturated with this corruption even before the first invasion. Now they've been cut off from it. It's not an illness, it's withdrawal. Kael'thas waved a hand dismissively at that. Whatevs. Even if that's true, why should we care? They were foolish enough to trust demons. Why should we be bothered about helping them cure an addiction? Because if we can return them to a peaceful state, we can release them from captivity, and then the tax money can be used elsewhere. The Archmage must have realised that point might cause the table to erupt back into the previous argument, so he quickly changed the subject. "Arthas, sorry I wasn't able to attend your initiation ceremony, but I hear it was quite the event." "Indeed. Stormwind was most gracious to me. It was good to see King Varian again as well. His lovely queen has recently provided him with an heir, I hear. Yep, little bugger's going to grow up to be a fine warrior, I'm sure of it. Well, as much as we all hope your coronation day is many years from now, can we look forward to a royal wedding anytime soon? Any young ladies tickle your fancy? Or are you still Lordaeron's most eligible bachelor?" Kael'thas immediately looked down at his plate, but it was pretty obvious he was following this new conversation keenly, and Jaina kept her own face carefully composed as well. That would be telling, would it not? And where's the fun in that? There's plenty of time left for such things. Mixed feelings then washed over Jaina. She was a little bit disappointed, but also somewhat relieved. Maybe it was best if her and Arthas remained only friends. That way she could carry on focusing on doing the things she'd come to Dalaran to do in the first place. Become an accomplished mage. And to do that, she needed to study. "I need to study!" A few days had passed since the dinner, and Jaina was now desperately trying to tell Arthas to sod off as he was approaching her with two horses. "Come on, Jaina. Even the most diligent student needs to take a break every now and then. Arthas, you will be a magnificent king one day. No one can seem to deny you anything." Arthas laughed and helped her to mount one of the horses, and then swung up easily on his own horse a moment later. "I don't think I ever said how sorry I was about Invincible. It's alright. But anyway, I have picnic supplies and the day awaits. Let's get!" And Jaina would remember this day for the rest of her life. They travelled quite far away from the city, crossing expansive green meadows and shiz. Even the horses loved it, and the picnic was nice, although I'm not sure why they went all the way to a snowy place rather than stay in the nice green meadows, but whatevs. They shared bread, cheese, wine, and then Arthas fell asleep for a bit, as you do when you have a bit of booze at lunchtime. So Jaina got a bit of peace to read a book about teleportation. But she then drifted off as well, and when she woke up, it was quite a bit later than she'd expected, and Arthas was nowhere to be seen. Arthas? There was no response. Maybe he'd just gone for a bit of an explore. This was fine. Everything was fine. But then Jaina's mind started to wander a bit. There were still orcs on the loose, or so the rumours went, and mountain cats, and bears. Maybe everything wasn't fine. Suddenly, an attack from behind. A wet, soggy thump on the back of her neck. A second wet missile flew towards her and caught her right in the mouth, and she started to choke. With laughter. She quickly grabbed a handful of snow from the ground herself and attacked back. Arthas, you don't fight fair! After the snowball fight had finished, Arthas emerged from his hiding spot. I knew it, all those years ago. Knew what? The first time I saw you, I knew you were a girl I could have fun with. Someone who wouldn't mind getting a snowball in the face. I didn't hurt you, did I? No, you didn't. Their eyes met and Jaina felt heat coming to her face cheeks as Arthas gently brushed snow from her hair, and the next thing she knew, they were kissing. F*** you bitch! And we're leaving it there! Oh dear, it's gone all soap opera-ish. If the romance parts are making you feel uncomfortable, then these next few chapters are going to be difficult for you. But if it's any consolation, at least you don't have to sit in a room on your own and act this whole thing out like a weirdo. As usual, link in the description if you're interested in buying this book. Also, there's links to my Discord server and my Patreon page too. If you enjoyed this video, like, subscribe, all of that bollocks. And all that's left to say is, thanks for watching, and see ya!